Has it ever happened to you before? You're going through something, and all seems to be well, and then it just gets crazy. And it switches. It switches from really exciting and overwhelming and cool, and then the next thing you know, you're face down in the dirt, overwhelmed and terrified. And then things get better, but then you're told, don't say anything. Don't say anything yet. There'll come a day and a time when you understand this better. And when that day and time comes that you understand better, and by the way, you'll know when it is, that's when I want you to tell the story. Tell the story of what you saw and what you heard. Tell the story in glorious detail about how exciting it was to start and how terrifying it got. But then, over time, and then that moment came, the moment you'll recognize. Then you remembered and you told the story in a new and a different way. When I think back on that day, it just seemed like any other day. Me and James and John, we were invited by Jesus, and we just went up the mountain. We didn't really know what was ahead. It was a long walk. We visited about things that had been happening, and Jesus was his same self as always. He would say things that made us think really hard. He would tell stories about stuff that had happened, and it was a great trip. Hanging out with Jesus was always special. And we felt special because he asked us to go with him. A lot of times Jesus would disappear and he wouldn't always invite us. But this time, he said we could go. And so up the mountain we went, we visited, and we got up on the mountain on top. And the next thing you know, Jesus was like on fire. He was glowing and bright, and everything had changed about him. His drabby old clothes and his dusty feet and his unkempt hair, the sweat. The sweat from the journey up that was dripping from all of us. All of that was gone. And it was like he was this angel. He was transfigured right in front of our eyes. It was amazing. And then, these two people, they showed up out of nowhere. They just appeared. Well, we didn't know who they were. But as we listened to them talk, we figured out it was Moses and Elijah. There's Jesus, all bright and shiny, and he's having a conversation with Moses about the law. He was having a conversation with Moses about, his work and the people of Israel and how these commandments were given. And Oh, it was a humorous conversation. And then Elijah pipes up and said, well, you think you had it bad, Moses. I had to come along and clean up your mess. And he started to tell Moses about his job as a prophet and how he came along and was explaining all of these laws and how the people had gone differently. All of that was so fascinating. You see, that's how we knew it was Moses and Elijah. We heard Jesus talking as well, saying to both of them, well, you think you two had it bad. I'll tell you what's ahead for me. It's not such an easy road. But it'll all be okay. I remember Jesus saying that. He said it'll all be okay. I didn't get it at the time. Well, in the middle of their conversation, the next thing you know, this bright cloud overtakes us. It's brilliant. Our vision was impaired. We couldn't see too much. It was really hard. Like if you've ever been in a really dense but bright fog, you're on your way someplace traveling, and the next thing you know, you can't see very far ahead of you. You don't really know what's out there, and you don't know what's ahead. And suddenly, the progress you know that you're making is slowed down, and you're worried. You're worried because, well, there's probably something out there, and you just want to be careful, you know. Robbers and animals. Crazy things happen when you can't see the road ahead. And so that was a little bit concerning. Here we'd gone from this great trip with our friend Jesus, great teaching, Moses and Elijah, listening to the conversation, and of course remembering Jesus saying, it'll be okay. And then the next thing you know, we heard this voice. This voice was overwhelming. It was so powerful, the words of this voice. They found their way through our ears and penetrated into every fiber of our being. The voice we heard said, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him." Well, that was a little much for us. I'm not proud to tell you. That's when we got really scared. We were so scared we all just dove on the ground and we kept our faces down. We didn't want to look anymore. It's funny, that voice did something to us. You know, it changed us hearing that. But then we were afraid. We didn't know what to do. And so we just dove to the ground and quit looking. We quit listening. We quit watching. We just kind of wanted the moment to pass. The next thing you know, Jesus came up. I still remember what his hand felt like on my shoulder. There I was, you know, his man, the rock. I was it. I was the one. He put his hand on my shoulder. That's when he said it. Don't be afraid. It'll be okay. After that, everything changed. The cloud was gone. I could see the sweat and salt on Jesus. He looked kind of messy, like he did before. And it was time to go. And so we started to go down the hill, feeling a little bit better, and actually, to be honest with you, feeling a little bit embarrassed. I mean, after all, we were with Jesus. He invited us, especially, to be there. He invited me, the rock. And as we were going down, he said something that was kind of hard. Because in one hand, I was so excited about all that had taken place. It was dramatic, Moses and Elijah and the conversation in the brightness. And then you have, of course, the fear. But that hand on my shoulder, those words, don't be afraid, it'll be okay. But then on the way down, Jesus said, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody just yet, I should say. That was the hard part. It was so dramatic. I felt so much up there. I felt joy and excitement. I felt overwhelmed in the piercing words that filled every fiber of my being. And then, of course, the fear, and then, not the fear. I was excited, yeah, and a little embarrassed. Did I tell you I was a little embarrassed too? James and John, those two, I'd expect those two to go face down in the dirt, but I was the rock. I should have stayed standing. But anyways, Jesus said, wait. Don't tell anybody just yet. And then he said, until the Son of Man is raised from the dead, then you can tell. Then you have to tell. Then you must tell. And now when I look back upon it, it's all triggered. It's all triggered because Jesus, the Son of Man, did die. And he came back to life. He has shown himself. He has taught us. He has loved us. But I remembered when he gazed into my eyes that moment. I remember that moment. He said, when the Son of Man is raised, and of course, so many things have happened between then and now. So many more opportunities we had to watch him heal and listen to him teach. It was always dramatic. And then, of course, there was the night I said I didn't know him 3 times. But I remembered. I remembered it all. I remembered it when he came back to life. I remembered it when he looked in my eyes, and I remembered when he said, don't be afraid. And that was it. That's what triggered it. He said, don't be afraid. And right there, it all came back to me. His hand, his words, in that voice. That voice that said, listen to him. And so today I'm just telling you the story. I'm telling you, I saw Jesus transfigured. In that moment, I knew something was different. In that moment, I heard God say, "This is my son." And in that moment, all my shame and failure, well, maybe not that moment, but when Jesus rose from the dead, I realized he took me up that mountain for a reason. And I realized it was both exciting and terrifying and then fear, but I realized I was there for a reason. Jesus was with me, and Jesus is still with me. You know, that's one of the last things he said to us. He said, "See, I am with you always. Go and teach and baptize in my name." I don't always tell that story because I'm not so sure what people will think of me. I'm scared to tell that story because I failed, but I have to tell the story. I have to tell the story because I can still feel his hand. I still hear that voice. And I want people to know what I know now. This is my son, in whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever been through something like a trip up a mountain and all those things, good and bad and surrounded in fear, and up and down you go, and then it's like you don't understand right away, but you know the hand of God, the hand of Jesus is upon you and with you. And you know you'll understand someday. And then when you do, you'll have to tell your story too. You see, people need to hear our stories. I'm wondering, what's your story? And when will it be time for you to tell it? Amen.